Hello everybody and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be talking about the story stuff with Scarlet's secret lair and a little bit of the marionette. I guess I do warn you, my younger brother's out of town, so we're stuck with his dog, and his dog is like crazy. So if you hear pining in the background, that's him restless, refusing to go to sleep. In any case, yeah, so today I finally managed to, now that I've killed the worm, spend some time experiencing the rest of the stuff in this patch. It actually took a lot longer than I was hoping because I'd done so little of the marionette event, and in order to find all the lore and all the story that comes from it, you really have to participate in that fight a few times, which of course is on a 2-hour cooldown, but I will explain to you guys how everything works. So as you all are probably aware, one of the main questions I've had over the past few months is, hey, Wooden Potatoes, what are these crazy mysterious probe things around? These are the thumper turrets that first appeared way back during the Fractured update, which coincidentally, perhaps not, was also the update where we found out Scarlet was looking into the ley lines of magic beneath the surface of Tyria. Well, this patch, they finally have a significant gameplay function. See, they've always been in certain spots, but now when you go around game, you can break these thumpers, which are being defended by various alliances set up by Scarlet, and they will give you power cores once you've broken and sabotaged them. Combining 50 of those power cords gives you a device that grants you entrance to a place called Scarlet's secret lair. It's a new area that's been hidden beneath the Dermond Priory, which is quite a fitting location if you ask me, behind a holographic wall. Those of you who have done the guild trek will be more than familiar with the cave system down there. It's changed ever so slightly to allow you to walk through one of the walls. If you remember how the Aetherblade hideout was hidden and the not so secret jumping puzzle was hidden, it's exactly the same as that. One of those holographic walls that look slightly wavy and have no collision you can walk through. Functionally, once you've found the lair and you've got inside by combining these power cores together, the room, in terms of mechanics, just serves as a place for you to get a butt ton of loot. It's full of chests, okay? And you can open those chests with ciphers, which you get by basically combining trash loot, again, from the marionette event. So you run lots of the marionette event, you get loads of these items, you combine the items together into ciphers, and then you can use the ciphers to open the chest in Scarlet's secret lair. And you can open those chests as many times as you like, and often you'll get 2 to 3 rares and a bunch of greens from the chests every single time. It's actually kind of funny because I spend all week doing the worm and being blown away when I randomly get a rare that drops from an enemy, and usually an enemy that's not a part of the event, and then I realise, oh, I do a little bit of the Scarlet secret lair stuff. I can open every chest a bunch of times and fill my inventory with rares and greens way quicker than the worm ever would have let me do. The other important thing about these chests is the very first time you open each individual one, you'll get a page of Scarlet's journal in addition to the other loot. Once you've opened every single chest, therefore, and this was the bit that took me some time because I was lacking the items for the toxic chest, so I had to keep running the marionette event so that I could finally get them. But once you've opened every single chest, that is, found all of the power cores and then found 25 of every type of loot that you get at the marionette event, combined it all together, opened every single chest, and you have got 5 pages of Scarlet's journal. Once you've combined all 5 of the pieces of the journal together, you can read it and unlock something else. I've actually copy-pasted from the wiki exactly what the journal says so that you guys can be all filled in. Now remember, this patch is called The Origins of Madness. A lot of it is supposed to be about Scarlet's motivations, her backstory, and making us realise there's actual meaning behind what's going on. Before this patch came out, really all we knew about Scarlet came from a blog post on an official website and the odd tiny thing actually in-game. But largely she spent her time running around doing random stuff and saying, aha, it's all a part of the master plan, and leaving. So I was quite excited to finally get this journal and see what more we would learn. We of course had that other personal story instance I already did a video on this week explaining a lot of the backstory we've already seen in game. You know, they threw that random Dermond Priory scholar in there who just talked people through everything that happened for those who perhaps are new to the living story and just returning. Well, this was perhaps the real motivations and some real insight into Scarlet. So I'll read it to you guys. I think it's pretty interesting. I will clarify as well, this is the first speculation video I've done in a while. I have mentioned over on Visualwood, I have had a bit of a conversation with the devs and I sort of know where some of this stuff's going. So I'm going to try and not be too fake with my speculation and let you guys just figure it out for yourselves. But we shall read, okay? I wake from nightmares, screaming, confused and scared. It's getting worse. I've decided to talk to a mender. I've probably just been working too hard. Oh, and I should add as well, okay, each page, it's like you get one line and then it seems to be a huge amount of time passes and then you get another line. This is one of the things I really don't like. How cool would it have been if we actually got to read a full journal here? But yeah, so we get one line and then we move on. Okay, so that was line 1. Then later, she says, every night, the same terrors. It never changes. The mender was unable to help me, and I feel like I'm losing control of myself. When the nightmares start, an entity calls to me. I run into a sea of darkness, but no matter how hard I try to escape, it keeps calling me. I'm not trying to sleep, too scared to even close my eyes. So scared. Whispers come from the forest all night long, calling me, taunting me, possessing me. Tonight I saw it. I stared into the abyss, and it stared back at me. So much power. I don't know what's real and what isn't anymore. Control of my world, of myself, is slipping through my hands. And yet, I'm no longer scared. It communicated with me through images of death, destruction, and destiny. I must know more. I must confront it and put an end to this madness. So I have a fair few comments on this. First of all, it's interesting to see how this perhaps slots into the story we already had. At the beginning, of course, she just seems to be a typical Sylvari like any other. The Menders, if you guys aren't aware, they tend to help newborn Sylvari find their way in the world. There's actually a passage on the blog post where Scarlet very quickly begins to refute what the Menders have to say and goes about on her own, and she's quite sassy. But in this personal journal, we're actually seeing a lot of her weaknesses. You know, the idea of Scarlet being scared, this insane, crazy woman that's just longed for destruction as far as we can see. You know, early in this journal, she's scared, too scared to close her eyes or go to sleep. This is an interesting angle of her that I'm glad ArenaNet are giving us. But then as we go along, it starts to talk about how there's all this power and something is calling to her, and she's even becoming possessed to the point where she's just as debauched and ridiculous as she's now become. I think the main thing, obviously, that we should be taking away from this journal is they are saying there is a bigger, greater evil, and I think that is something that might frustrate some people. You know, a lot of the early stuff in the Living Story before Scarlet was really the big thing. It was, oh, this is because of a bigger, greater evil. Something is causing all this. Something is causing it. And then it turned out to be Scarlet. And then we've had all these months with Scarlet and never really learning anything. And now the answer once again is, oh, there's something big and there's something greater in the background. And I can understand if people get a little bit annoyed by that. But I think that this is a little bit more tangible this time. And many people, of course, are instantly thinking Elder Dragons. It's communicating with me through images of death, destruction, and destiny. The question is, though, why would an Elder Dragon be calling out specifically to Scarlet, just a random Sylvari? There are some other theories that suggest this might not have anything to do with an Elder Dragon at all. Particularly, I think a lot of players are keen on the idea of Abaddon having something going on here. While I would personally be quite interested in that plot coming forward, I think it's also quite clear that ArenaNet aren't going back to Abaddon. They did confirm many times before Guild Wars 2 came out that that was a storyline that is over, it's done with. It would sort of be like we're going back to the same place we were with Guild Wars 1. You know, in that game, we had 3 full campaigns, and every time it was, oh, the big evil was controlled by this guy, and it all looped up to Abaddon. And then we killed him, and they said, right, that's it, it's over. This is this story complete. And I quite like that as a complete chapter, and I've come to terms with it as a complete chapter. If they suddenly threw Abaddon back again, and it's like all of the cause of all of our strife is still this same old thing, I think it would be beating a dead horse for a little bit too long, as much as I'd love to see more stuff gone into about the lore of the world. You guys have to consider as well, those theories perhaps do have some merit, because we were given the choice to do a fractal about the Thormanova reactor or a fractal about Abaddon, and it turned out that the one in the Thormanova reactor was very integral to the story of Scarlet, so therefore perhaps the Abaddon one would have been also. But we can't say that for sure. I would like to think that if it was the Abaddon fractal, it would have been purely about that, rather than of having Scarlet shoehorned in, but we can never know, of course, because that wasn't the decision that the community made. Anyway, yeah, interesting little journal there. This idea of the abyss, she's staring into it, referencing slightly some of these things we saw in the blog post, and overall I do feel like it pushed the story forward a tiny bit more. Now, there is something extra to this journal. Once you've read it, you can have access to a console in the secret lair, which is password protected by some word. Now, throughout the course of the journal, you can notice every now and then a random letter is capitalized, and if you put all of the letters together, the password is revealed to you, which is OMAD. Now, OMAD is not a character anyone who's only ever experienced in-game stuff will have any idea who it is. This was one of the main characters in that blog post I've been talking so much about. This was Scarlet's mentor once she turned to the Asura to learn more about the world and supposedly, you know, deal with these visions she was having in her head, which I guess was her main motivation for learning all this stuff. OMAD was her mentor. OMAD was the person who vouched for her even getting into the colleges of Ratasum, which is completely unprecedented, having a Sylvari in there amongst all of the Asuran geniuses. And he was also the one that once Scarlet had been banished, snuck her back in to perform the experiment where she finally cracked and she went into the mists and the pale tree was begging her, please, no, don't look any further, what you see will ruin you. And she had this moment where she changed who she was. She came out of that vision, she killed OMAD in a sudden twist and left. It seems like she hasn't completely forgotten about OMAD. OMAD is perhaps still important to her, and this console is actually password protected with his name. Now, before I talk about what happens once you enter that password in, because it's slightly different, I do want to just linger on this idea of OMAD for a second. While I was doing the worm, I haven't read this, but I believe an interview came out. Some people were talking to me about this. An interview came out where they were talking about this new character in the living story called Taimi. Taimi is this Asuran progeny that's randomly come out of nowhere, and she's saying, oh, yes, I'm super interested in Scarlet. Who is Scarlet? Blah, 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 blah. And, you know, really, really obsessed, it seems. You know, even her name, Taimi, means sapling, right? And she's just sort of been thrown in there. Apparently, there was an interview where it was announced that Taimi doesn't have a father anymore. Like, she was adopted, I believe, was how they described it. And that's very interesting. Why would that be a part of the plot? Well, the proposition would be, and this wasn't what I originally thought of, I must say, but I think it's bang on. What if Taimi is OMAD's daughter? What if the reason why this new Asuran character that's come into the living story is so obsessed with Scarlet, and perhaps is even named as she is, like after Sapling or whatever, is because her father, OMAD, used to work with Scarlet, and now OMAD's dead. Taimi knows that Scarlet had something to do with it, and now she's looking for vengeance. She's looking to learn. She's looking to find out who this Scarlet character was that her father spent so long with before being murdered by her brutally. Like, that would be a really interesting place to go with the story, and a really good reason why Taimi is actually a part of this story now. Just a theory, and it's based on obviously something that hasn't appeared in game yet, but I really liked it. I definitely wanted to mention it. This could be why we're seeing Taimi. This could be exactly where that story is meant to be going. Anyway, so back to the console. Once you've entered OMAD into the console, the game will actually project a monitor onto one of the rock walls in the cave. Now, I just want to mention outside of the story straight away, I think this was awesome. This is like one of the coolest things that they've done for a while. I've constantly been jaded a little by the living story and wondering how can they make it more engaging to people. You know, we've got all these little dialogue boxes that people are so desperate to skip over. We had, when the personal story came out, rather clunky, you know, two-character conversations that didn't work too well. Right now, they're doing some good cutscenes, but cutscenes obviously take them a really long time to develop. How can they tell a story through the game without using these, you know, flawed systems? And in this patch, we've actually seen this idea of a monitor being projected to a wall. I think this was really good. Looking at screens like this, it's sort of like we're seeing a cutscene, but not quite, and it's not confined to the idea of being stuck, unable to control your character. It's not stuck in just a little dialogue box. I thought it was really, really cool. And if we see more story being told through monitors that we project here and there, and we're basically like watching videos in the game, that could be awesome. Anyway, so the content of this monitor is, it keeps flipping through screens. One of the screens is showing the locations of all the thumper turrets. So's another one. There's one of like this giant drill looking thing, like this blueprint of this massive drill that will perhaps have some significance in the future. And then lastly, there's one really important one. Bear in mind, guys, that this comes like basically right at the end of the patch. You've done loads of stuff to get into the secret lair. You've fought loads of the marionette to open the chest. You've had to open every single one. You've had to find the secret password. And now finally you're at this monitor, okay? And one of the images is showing, again, all of the thumper locations, but it's zoomed in on the general Lion's Arch area. And every single significant area around Lion's Arch there has got a big red X on it, as if it's going to be a target. So the Dermond Priory is near Lion's Arch. The Vigil Keep is near Lion's Arch. The Order of Whispers base, which I quite like that Scarlet knows about where that is, because that is supposed to be sort of a secret area, again has got a red X. And finally Lion's Arch itself has got a red X. There seems to be an idea. Don't forget, we are in the last 4 patches now, well, only 3 more remaining. We're coming up to the climax of this story. It seems like they're setting up some big conflict in this area, a lot of the places that should be important to characters. I particularly like that the Order areas are highlighted there. Perhaps some inclusion of the actual orders in the living world stuff would be nice. nice. You know, an actual reason to go back and honor those decisions you made during your personal story. And Lion's Arch as well, of course, is a very exciting prospect. Don't forget that in the trailer for all of this stuff, we saw a broken Asura Gate, and there are a hell of a lot of Asura Gates in Lion's Arch. So this definitely seems to be hinting at what the climax of the story is. Why those arrows are there, why there's this drill blueprint, this actually hasn't been explained to people, but we have had a bit more of an insight into exactly what Scarlet's doing. Lastly, the secret lair has got a bunch of stuff that's not necessarily game mechanics, right? It's not opening chests and getting loot, it's not fiddling about with consoles, but just the room itself has got a lot of trinkets and hints and things strewn all about it. And I've got to say, for me, this was one of the most fun things about the patch. I usually play with my client muted, but just for this one occasion, I played with all my in-game volume sounds up really loud, and it was really awesome, like with the sound effects and the ambience in the cave as you're sort of gently walking about, and you can hear the rocks moving beneath your feet and as you sort of scrabble about and look through all the papers and things. It's really cool. It's so ambient. But there's a bunch of things that you can see that are perhaps worth noting. Wiki's actually got quite a nice list, and I'll just scroll through the important ones for you guys, and then a couple that I made on my own. First of all, there's a really cool image in there of what is quite clearly the pale tree with a red vine snaking its way around it. Those who read the blog post will know precisely what this is. This is the moment when Scarlet, inside Omad's machine, looking into the mists, looking into this thing that changed her life and made her the way she is. This was the moment that she snapped, and this was what she described seeing in the dream. It's the pale tree, but it's being throttled and corrupted and attacked by a red vine. This is Scarlet Briar's namesake. This image you see on the wall is Scarlet Briar, and it's really cool that they, at least she's quite a crudely drawn artist, I suppose, but it shows that it's on her mind and she's sketched it out at some point and it's important to her and she's thrown it up on the wall. So that was really cool to see and recognize immediately. Apparently Wiki says, I can actually see this one, but apparently there is a picture of Omad in there as well, and Scarlet's just been like ripping the paper and throwing stuff at it like it's a dartboard of some kind, like she's venting her frustration, like she blames Omad for giving her that vision for all like the crippling terror she's had on her, which is really interesting. You know, she came out of this and immediately killed him. There's still hatred brewing there. There's another thing on the wall. As you guys know, I think people were getting a little bit tired of it, but I guess it was sort of a motif of Scarlet at this point. This idea that she was pairing up lots of different races and making these alliances, where you can see a note on the wall that is her various concepts for different alliances she could go with. So she's got a bunch of races on the left and a bunch of races on the right, and then she's drawn all these lines that could potentially connect them up. Most of the lines that she's drawn are scribbled out because they're like failed attempts, but just a few remain, and the ones that remain are the Flame Legion with the Dredge, and they are the Crate with the Nightmare Court, and the Inquest with the Aetherblade Pirates. Those are the ones remaining, but it's really interesting to see what our other propositions were going to be. Like, for example, the Tengu were on there. The Tengu were going to be matched with the Lagos, and I like that because I think ArenaNet knows just as well as the players do that these are the two of the biggest candidates for being player races, and then they were like connected together somehow in Scarlet's schemes, you know, slight outlying races that will eventually become invested in the Elder Dragon's fight, and Scarlet's paired them together. Some I can't even begin to imagine why she would pair them up, like Centaurs and Hylek for some reason. And you have to consider as well, she's got a bunch of races in her left column and a bunch of races in her right column. So does that mean all the races on the left have got something in common and all the ones on the right have got something in common? Because I really can't see it. What do Tengu and Dredge and Hylek and Crate have in common, for example, and Quaggan have in common? Like, it's very, very, very difficult to tell. Maybe they're all displaced races that were on the right-hand side? You know, they've all been moved from somewhere else? That's an interesting idea. The Dredge, if you go far enough back, I suppose, were. Or maybe all races that have been oppressed in some way. But I suppose, you know, give me a racing guild or two that hasn't been oppressed somehow at some point. The Char, the Jotun. You know, these are flat statements that you can't make. In any case, it's a cool thing on the wall. It's a cool thing to ponder over that I quite appreciated. One that many people found very funny, one of Scarlet's proposed mega weapons that never came to be, is like a joke picture. It looks like a dolly-ack with rockets on it, which is pretty cool. And then there's a very big important one. And this is that if you look on the ceiling of the cave while you're in there, splattered in red paint, huge across the entire ceiling, is what looks to be some kind of Elder Dragon. You combine what we're reading in the journal with the image up there, and it seems to push the story more and more away from Abaddon, in my opinion, and further towards this idea of the Elder Dragons coming into Living Story plot at some point. Which dragon it is specifically, it's really hard to tell. It's a very crude drawing, and of course we've barely seen the designs of any of the dragons at this point. You know, Zaitan had a very specific design. I doubt when we eventually get to Primordus, who is probably one of the biggest candidates for this, when we get to Primordus, whether he will look how he did in Eye of the North or not is completely up for grabs. He was kind of boring in Eye of the North, and I'd like to think they'd try and do something different. But yeah, you can definitely see some kind of painting in the sky. Speaking of this idea of Primordus, there's an image on the wall. This is something that I saw at least. There is an image of a thumper turret, and it seems to be thumping into the ground, and on her sketch deep underground you can see what looks like some kind of a chasm. Is that meant to represent a ley line perhaps, or like some kind of chamber down there where perhaps Primordus is lying in wait? Who knows? That was a pretty cool one too. There's some other stuff as well that I noticed. Like, for example, there are cages in the room. There are 2 cages as if people have been held captive. One of them's even got bones in it. Is this actually significant? Is this just clutter that's meant to fill the room? Or are we actually meant to be thinking, wow, who did Scarlet have trapped in here? Who did she have trapped so long that they died? Or is this just a room that she found and there were already cages there and she's just decided to use it for her own purposes for now? I didn't really see many people questioning that, but I think that would be pretty interesting if we found out someone for some reason was important to her besides Omad and eventually got killed. The other thing I found myself most wondering about in the room, of course, is whether you could translate any of her scripts, because there's so much of her writing, but I think it's very, very loose cursive, the resolution's not high enough, and I can't read New Crichton very well anyway, so I don't know whether much of it is translatable. That's about it. As I say, I'm not going to go into my own personal speculation at the moment because it's not really speculation anymore. So I'll just tell you guys what is there in the patch. We will be coming to the conclusion of this stuff very soon, and I'll give you definitely many more thoughts when that time comes. But this is what we've seen in the Secret Lair. I think, especially in combination with all the stuff we saw in the other instance where we had all the main characters and they were actually getting real stories going, and also in combination with, you know, the 2 mega bosses that we had, one of which obviously I've spent a lot of time with. This patch has been really, really substantial in the content it's put out there. In terms of getting people speculating about the Living Story, I've heard more people talking about Living Story this patch than I have in a long time, and that's great. It means people are actually getting invested. You know, instead of just giving us a little bit of text and some really cartoony, flat dialogue, they've given us the opportunity to inspect some stuff out for ourselves, and that's awesome. I would love to see it get to a point where we have a lot of that strong character stuff continuing on in the foreground for Living Story, but every patch there's a place like the Secret Lair that we can actually spend our time looking around and getting on our hands and knees and seeing whether there are any hints about, you know, a real thought that there could be meaning behind the placement of objects and things that are hinting at stuff in future patches. Would be awesome if that was reoccurring. So every patch of the Living Story, there's all this speculation, there's all these little things to think about, as well as, you know, getting invested in characters. So yeah, overall, this is 1 of 4, patch 1 of 4. I'm thoroughly enjoying it. I'm very happy with it. It's one of the few patches actually that, well, especially before we killed the worm, I was actually getting really worried I wasn't going to be able to experience it all, you know, and I played this game an awful lot. So I think that's a really good sign. Patch 2, of course, is going to be about world versus world, largely the Edge of the Mists, but there's going to be a lot of Living Story stuff coming there too. Tomorrow, I'll be giving you guys a video about all the pre-release information we've heard about in the next patch. We'll do a bit of speculation on that, and then I guess we're just sitting on our hands until it finally goes live, which shouldn't be too long for now. Let me know what you guys thought about the Secret Lair. Is there something really big that I missed, perhaps? Probably. I guess we can have a discussion about it in the comments. Anyway, I'll see you guys there. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you have a wonderful evening, and I will see you next time.